I would like to share with you tips on writing discussion in your thesis. First of all, let us understand what it means by discussion chapter. The discussion chapter is where you interpret and explain your results within your thesis or dissertation. This chapter is different with your finding or result chapter, in which in your result or finding chapter, you merely present and describe your analysis finding. But in discussion, you need to discuss your finding. In this chapter, you will also have a look at how relevant and or significant your finding to your field of study. For example, if you're doing study on special education, then you need to see whether your discussion is relevant or not with your main variables, which is related to special education. And in I think your discussion chapter also, you will need to argue the conclusion that you draw from your own data analysis, in which that you need to criticize your own finding. Okay, in discussion chapter also, you need to explain and discuss your research finding thoroughly and in a coherent manner. This is how to make your discussion chapter strong enough for you to have a good discussion and will have a good summary. Okay, discussion chapter should be analyzed, explore the meaning, and identify the importance of data that you presented in your result chapter, which means in your finding chapter. Bear in mind that it is important to remember that your discussion chapter is a reflection of your result chapter, in which that it means that whatever you presented in your finding chapter, it should be discussed in your discussion chapter with no additional result that you haven't described in your finding chapter. It is vital to know that you don't need to report any new findings in your discussion chapter. Please don't do this. Don't report any new finding or new additional finding in which you did not mention in your finding chapter. Your discussion chapter should focus on findings that are directly connected to your research objectives and research questions. So it's very important to really understand your research objective and your research question before you write your discussion chapter. And in your discussion chapter also, you should acknowledge the limitation of your study. This limitation can cover any part of your study, from the scope or theoretical basis to the analysis method or sampling. For example, you may find that your collected data from a very small sample with unique characteristics, in which this would mean that you are unable to generalize your result to a broader population. This is your limitation. You need to mention in your discussion that your result cannot be generalized due to your sampling method. Okay, basically, what should be in your discussion chapter? First of all, same as all the other chapters, you need to start your discussion chapter with introduction. You need to give an overview introduction of your discussion chapter. What is the content of your discussion chapter? So you briefly explain. This chapter will explain blah 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 blah. This is for to give overview of your discussion chapter. Then it is very important for you to restate your research problem and research question, not writing it again. I repeat, please do not rewrite your research question as it is mentioned in your chapter 1 in your discussion chapter. You need to restate it in a sentence manner. Okay, next, discussion. When doing discussion, you need to answer your research question. you no need to rewrite the question as it is in chapter 1, but you need to restate your research question. You need to discuss your finding accordingly to your research question and hypothesis, if there are, and tie them together and refer back to your previous studies, which you already stated in your chapter 2, literature review, in which you would have covered in your literature review chapter. But bear in mind, you need to state the references. If you refer to your chapter 2, you need to state again the references to which citation that you already made. Okay. Next is you need to interpret your results and summarize the findings of the study. Only include what you reported in your results section. Don't introduce any new information. This is very important. Just interpret your result and summarize your finding accordingly to what you already done in your chapter, finding chapter. Next is you need to elaborate and evaluate your research findings and discuss the significance and implication of your result in chapter, in your discussion chapter. You also need to summarize your key findings from your results. Example, the data suggests that the ADHD students need to be what? Or the data suppose the theory that stated that children with autism is due to what? Or the analysis identifies that what? This is how you need to summarize your key finding in your discussion chapter. So it will not seem like you are just displaying your findings. So when interpreting your results, you need to look on how your finding compare to findings from past researchers, which you already stated in your literature review. Even if your finding contrasts with past research, you need to highlight this in your discussion. In fact, these contrasts are often can be one of the interesting findings because your finding contrasts with the past findings or that already found by the previous researchers. When interpreting your findings, be careful not to draw any conclusion or make claims that are not backed up with evidence. This is called sweeping statements. You need to back up your interpretation of your finding. You need to refer to data presented in your previous finding chapter. The next is about research implication. In your research discussion chapter, you need to discuss about what is your research implication. You need to discuss the implication of your finding towards several authorities. For example, if you are doing on special education, you can discuss the implication to bahagian pendidikan khas, Ministry of Education, or to the Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri, or to the parents who have a special needs children, or to the teachers. This is the research implications. Then theoretical implication. In this part, if related to your study, you can discuss about the advance of a new theory found by your study, or support a theory, or improve a theory, or provide a new insight. So you should discuss about how your finding contribute to this theoretical. Next one is practical implication. This is very simple. Practical implication is you should discuss about how your finding can apply to a new insight derived from your thesis. How your finding can be used in the real world. In other words, you should discuss about what is the contribution that can be contributed by the finding of your thesis. Next one is you should make recommendations for implementation and opportunity for future research. How to do this is you can suggest how other studies build on what they have found in their study and also what other study can do to improve findings of your study by overcoming some of your limitations. For example, you can explain any factors that you didn't consider in your study so that the new researcher can do that. You also can provide recommendations. It is recommended that not more than 2 for further research to be done. Do not offer suggestion in which it could have been easily addressed within this study, because this will show that there has been inadequate examinations or inadequate data of your study. Finally, is the concluding summary. You need to make a conclusion based on your finding that directly address your research question. Do a discussion on this. Focus your conclusion on your main variables.